What is the supreme law of the Federation? Under Article 4 Clause 1 of the Federal Constitution, it is expressed that, this Constitution is the supreme law of the Federation, and any law passed after Merdeka Day which is inconsistent with this Constitution shall, to the extent of the inconsistency, be void. What is the definition of Constitution here? According to Act 388, which is Interpretation Acts 1948 and 1967, Constitution means the federal constitution and includes the constitutions of the states. Meanwhile, federal constitution means the Constitution of Malaysia and does not include the constitution of the states. If Article 4 Clause 1 had intended to limit to questions relating to the federal constitution only, then it would have used the term federal constitution instead of constitution, or it would have made its intention clear by expressly excluding the state constitutions from its ambit. Such clear intention of Article 4 Clause 1 can be found in the Interpretation Acts 1948 and 1967, which expressly excludes the constitution of the states from the definition of federal constitution. Therefore, the supreme law of the Federation is the federal constitution and includes the constitutions of the states. Why do we need to understand the definition of constitution? We need to understand the definition of constitution, which means federal constitution and includes the constitutions of the states, because it is important for us to see if an act of parliament, amendment and the action of the federal government is consistent or not with the rights of the people in Sabah and Sarawak as embodied in the state constitution. Now, based on the definition given in Act 388, we understand that both the federal constitution and state constitution is supreme law in the Federation of Malaysia. With the understanding of the definition of the constitution, and the need to observe the consistency between the federal constitution and state constitution, now we will expose the unconstitutionality due to inconsistencies in various federal law and amendment of the federal constitution which become the 13 May 1969 tragedy of Borneo. The Borneo states of Sabah and Sarawak have been living in hell since this tragedy happens in 1969. But, what actually happens in the Borneo states of Sabah and Sarawak during this darkest hour of Malaysia? To unravel what happened to the Borneo states of Sabah and Sarawak, we need to look at the law that is already in place in Sabah and Sarawak. The Borneo states of Sabah and Sarawak already has their own law in owning and governing their own continental shelf under Sarawak, Alteration of Boundaries, Order in Council, 1954 and North Borneo, Alteration of Boundaries, Order in Council 1954. In the Borneo states of Sabah and Sarawak, the territory of the state means all area within the boundaries of the states which comprised the territory of Sarawak immediately before Malaysia Day, and includes, by virtue of the Sarawak, Alteration of Boundaries, Order in Council, 1954 Volume 6. Page 1025, the continental shelf being the seabed and its subsoil which lies beneath the high seas contiguous to the territorial waters of Sarawak. This law was enforceable in Sabah and Sarawak before the formation of Malaysia and remain enforceable after the formation of Malaysia. In Sarawak, even before the formation of Malaysia, Oil Mining Ordinance 1958 has been enacted to govern the exploration and mining of oil and gas throughout the state. Oil Mining Ordinance 1958 is an ordinance to make better provision in the law relating to oil mining in Sarawak and on its continental shelf. In this Oil Mining Ordinance 1958, it has been properly defined that continental shelf means that area of the continental shelf which has been included in the boundaries of Sarawak by virtue of the Sarawak, Alteration of Boundaries, Order in Council, 1954. In this Oil Mining Ordinance 1958, alienated land has been defined, which means land the oil rights in which are vested in the Crown but the surface of which has been alienated at any time whether such surface has been revaised in the Crown or not. Again, it is also has been defined that land and lands include the foreshores and submarine areas beneath Sarawak waters and also the area of the continental shelf. This is consistent with Article 47 Clause 2 of the Constitution of the State of Sarawak, which expressed that any land in the states which immediately before the commencement of this Constitution was vested in Her Majesty shall on the commencement of this Constitution vest in the state. This means, the continental shelf of Sarawak has been vested to the state of Sarawak. To understand what happened to the Borneo states of Sabah and Sarawak during the May 13, 1969 tragedy, let us look at it from the beginning, on what and how it happens tentatively through the passage of history. Malaysia Agreement 1963 was signed in London on July 9, 1963 by the United Kingdom, Federation of Malaya, North Borneo, Sarawak, and Singapore. Subsequently, on September 16, 1963, the Federation of Malaysia was formed between the states of Malaya, Singapore, Sabah, and Sarawak based on this agreement. Based on Article 2 of Malaysia Agreement 1963, the government of the Federation of Malaya will take such steps as may be appropriate and available to them to secure the enactment by the Parliament of the Federation of Malaya of an act in the form set out in Annex A to this agreement, and that it is brought into operation on August 31, 1963. And the date on which the said act is brought into operation is hereinafter referred to as Malaysia Day. However, due to the United Nations Malaysian Mission, Malaysia Day came into force on September 16, 1963, in accordance with Article 2, as amended by the Agreement of August 28, 1963. Concurrently, the Malaysia Act 1963, number 26 of 1963, has been passed in the Parliament of the Federation of Malaya in August 1963, on which the terms for the Malaysia Agreement 1963 have been annexed and inserted into the new Federal Constitution of Malaysia. In the 9th schedule of the Federal Constitution, the legislative rights on the land fall within the legislative rights of the state government of Sabah and Sarawak, listed as Item 2 in the state list. Therefore, the federal government has no power over any land in Sabah and Sarawak. Consistently, subject to Article 47(1) of the Sarawak State Constitution, subject to the provisions of this article, all property and assets which immediately before the commencement of this Constitution were vested in Her Majesty for the purposes of the colony of Sarawak shall on the commencement of this Constitution vest in the state. And specifically, Article 47(2) state that any land in the state which immediately before the commencement of this Constitution was vested in Her Majesty shall on the commencement of this Constitution vest in the state. In the 9th schedule of the new Federal Constitution, Item 8(j) of the Federal List, which is trade, commerce, and industry, is subject to Item 2(c) in the state list. Item 8(j) is the federal legislative rights on the development of mineral resources, mines, mining, minerals and mineral ores, oils and oil fields, purchase, sale, import, and export of minerals and mineral ores, petroleum products, regulation of labor and safety in mines and oil fields. All of these federal legislative rights are subject to the state legislative rights on land, which is subject to Item 2(c) in the state list, on which the state government has the rights to impose permits and licenses for prospecting for mines, mining leases and certificates. Without any permits and licenses for prospecting for mines, mining leases and certificates from the state government, nobody can undertake any activity under Item 8(j) of the federal list. Without any permits and licenses for prospecting for mines, mining leases and certificates from the state government, nobody can undertake the development of mineral resources, mines, mining, minerals and mineral ores, oils and oil fields, purchase, sale, import and export of minerals and mineral ores, petroleum products, regulation of labor and safety in mines and oil fields. All of these activities required permits and licenses for prospecting for mines, mining leases and certificates from the state government. In the 10th Schedule, Part 5 of the Federal Constitution, Item 1 spelled additional sources of revenue assigned to states of Sabah and Sarawak, which is import duty and excise duty on petroleum products. Under special grants and assignments of revenue to states of Sabah and Sarawak, which is Article 112C Clause 4b of the new Federal Constitution of Malaysia, expressed that subject to Clause 5 of Article 112D. In relation to the state of Sabah or Sarawak, Clause 3b of Article 110, shall not authorize Parliament to prohibit the levying of royalties on any mineral by the state or to restrict the royalties that may be so levied in any case so that the state is not entitled to receive a royalty amounting to 10% ad valorem, calculated as for export duty. This means the state government of Sabah and Sarawak has the rights to levy royalties on any mineral. According to the Constitution of the State of Sarawak, Article 12(1), mentioned that the state shall have power to acquire, hold, and dispose of property of any kind and to make contracts. Therefore, any property belong to the state of Sarawak, the state shall have power over it. According to the Sarawak Interpretation Ordinance, 2005, Chapter 61, property includes a. money, goods, choses in action, land, and every description of property, whether real or personal, and land includes land covered by water and all buildings and things attached to the land. Here we can see that the land covered by water is the property rights which include the area of continental shelf being the seabed and its subsoil which lies beneath the high seas contiguous to the territorial waters of Sarawak. The Federal Constitution was again very clear that the revenue from land is the revenue rights of the state of Sarawak under 10th Schedule, Part 3, Sources of Revenues Assigned to States, which is listed as Item 2 where revenue from lands, mines and forests is the revenue rights of Sabah and Sarawak. Section 75 of the Malaysia Act, Number 26, only dealt with succession to property by the Federation in respect of land that was in use by either the United Kingdom government or the Sarawak Colonial Administration. This is not relevant to the matter of territorial waters. As for Section 76 of the Malaysia Act, Number 26, the provision dealt with succession to rights, liabilities and obligations of the state prior to Malaysia Day. Once again, the matter of Sarawak's territorial waters does not fit in such criteria. Therefore, the federal government has no property rights over the territorial waters of Sarawak. The property rights on land, territorial waters, including any mineral such as oil and gas belong to the state government of Sabah and Sarawak.